Sometimes we can choose to reinvent ourselves, but sometimes reinvention chooses us. A career in business and finance was a dream come true for Christiane Palpant. She never considered giving it up.
I loved my team. I loved the team that I directed. I loved my boss. He was an excellent boss, and he was really so knowledgeable and intelligent, and I loved our client base. So I wasn't looking to change.
But change is exactly what she had to do when she literally died after a client meeting. Christiane's story up next on Reinvention at Any Age. How did you end up in this kind of situation? And that changed the whole trajectory of your life. This is my light, and I'm going to let it shine. Even if it's uncomfortable, if the change is for the better, it's worth it. Don't be scared. Prepare. Reinvention is possible. Go make it happen for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Reinvention at Any Age. I'm Amy Sweezy, and I am passionate about helping you navigate through your own reinvention. Whether you want to do it or you have to do it, the question we all ask is, how do I do it? How do I reinvent myself, whether I'm 20 or 40 or 60? My guest today found herself at the crossroads of reinvention, and not because she necessarily wanted to, but because she literally died, flatlined, after her heart gave out and her body made her find a new path. As she neared her 50th birthday, Christiane Palpant looked like she had it all. She had a lucrative career in business and finance and traveled extensively for a Fortune 200 company in a high-powered job. And one night, she was at a client dinner when she started having chest pains out of the blue and collapsed when she reached the hospital door. An unknown virus had attacked her heart, and after open heart surgery, doctors forced her onto bed rest for 2 years. No more traveling, no more stress, no more climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, which she had done, by the way. So now what? It was time to reinvent her life. Christiane started with a focus on painting and eventually took a cross-country trip in a decked-out Sprinter van she named Millicent. She visited all 50 states over the course of 3 years, painting their horizons. And now she is back from her journey and here to chat with us today. Please welcome Christiane Palpant to the podcast. Hello.
Amy, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation and for the time together.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you're here. And I should preface this by telling everyone that you and I have known each other a very long time. We actually graduated from high school together in Michigan in the same class.
We did in the very same class. And I don't know if you'll come forward with that year that we graduated or not. Is that top secret?
No, 1989. We're 80s girls and proud of it, right?
That's right. And we had the hair to prove it.
For sure. Gen X all the way.
Right.
Well, listen, CP, a lot of people think about reinventing themselves, obviously. They're looking for a change, want to try something new, but you really weren't looking to reinvent yourself, right?
I wasn't. I really loved my job, the Fortune 200 job that you talked about. I loved my team. I loved the team that I directed. I loved my boss. He was an excellent boss, and he was really so knowledgeable and intelligent, and I loved our client base. So I wasn't looking to change.
That's amazing, because I don't think there's too many people that can say, I love my boss and I want to stay at my job.
That's right. Now, there was a lot of moving parts. And like you mentioned, there was a lot of travel, but I really enjoyed the travel part too, as you probably know about me. It's not glamorous, but I enjoyed it.
And I know I read on your bio, and I know that you actually traveled for your job across all 50 states before you even started on this whole reinvention.
I did. So I held client meetings in Anchorage, Alaska, in Orlando, Florida, Portland, Maine, Albuquerque, New Mexico, every single state, because we dealt with banks, and there are banks in every town of every state.
One of the stories that you talk about is that while you were working in that job, you discovered that you had a leaky roof. Can you share a little bit about that story?
Amy, that was a powerful turning point for me because after the near, the flatlining, the hard experience, I was trying to stay the way I was. I was trying to go back into my high power job because I liked it and that's what I knew. And I was trying to be something that I was before and not what I was becoming. And so it actually was making me even more sick. I couldn't stay healthy. Even though I was a healthy person before all that happened, it just was really hard. And so I remember I went back after the open heart surgery, after the bed rest. I went back to my job and I ended up crying to my sister and her husband because I couldn't do it. And that's when her husband said to me, "You have a leaky roof." And I really paused. I was like, what is he talking about? He's a
Right?
really intelligent guy, but I was like, what is this about a leaky roof? Because I knew my roof was okay. And he was figuratively talking about me. I had a leaky roof. And he said to me, "Do you know the song about the man with the leaky roof?" Of course I hadn't. And he said, there was a man who had a leaky roof. And when the storms came, the rains came through the ceiling. So he would run around the house with the buckets trying to gather the rainwater. Then the sun would come out and he would go out and play and forget about his leaky roof. And then when the storms would come again, he'd run around and do the same thing in an emergency, trying to gather the rainwater again. Mm-hmm. And then he looked at me and he pointed and he said, "You're doing that same thing. And you've got to fix your leaky roof." It was an aha moment. And I didn't have the answers at that point, Amy. I didn't. I was like, well, how do I become what my next chapter is when all I knew was the previous chapter? So that's what that reinvention journey was all about.
And that's kind of how it started. So did you feel like, the doctor, you didn't have a choice, right? The doctors were like, you got to get your heart rate down. You got to calm down. You got to stop this stressful job. Yes. Do you feel like you reinvented yourself into an artist, or would you say that was kind of more of an evolution?
That was an evolution because that was not day one. What I did right away, Amy, is when the doctor said, "You've got to go to bed. You've got to calm down. You got to change your life." I knew that was a recipe for a mental health disaster. I knew it right at the beginning. As soon as they said that, I thought, because I'm such a go-get, like you are, Amy, a go-getter. Let's do. Let's go. And I'd always lived on, I enjoyed stress, right? Like you said, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and I did all these fun things. And I knew it was a recipe for a mental health disaster. So I immediately got my journal out and I got my pen out and I thought, okay, what can I do? There's a lot that I can't do right now, but what can I do? And I forced myself to write 100 things that I could do, because then I didn't have to do all of those on the list, but they were really, really, really small things like brush your teeth and breathe.
Wow. Because that doesn't take a lot of energy.
No, right? But when you have to reinvent yourself, sometimes you have to get down to the real basics of, okay, let's build this foundation all over again and figure out what that's going to look like. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you started painting, and we should mention too that it wasn't like you had zero painting experience. Your mom is actually a professional artist, right?
That's exactly right. But I didn't know. She was always the artist. I never thought of myself as an artist. I used art as a catharsis. I used art as a way to relax from my left brain job. And I would think of myself as like a Jackson Pollock, where I would get home and just throw art at the canvas, right? It was just like splatter ball art. And so
then someone would pay $1 million for it.
Well, that's what I'm waiting for, Amy.
Right.
And so I had all the supplies, and I think that the evolution came from that, where I found it to be really healing and a way to transfer those emotions onto the canvas and a way to express these complex emotions that were going on in my heart, both physically and figuratively, right?
Right. And obviously, your art was pretty amazing because your pieces ended up in art galleries all over the world.
They did. They
And that's
did.
not what you set out to do.
No, I didn't. And in fact, I thought it was spam when the galleries reached out to me. I really did. And I just let it sit in my inbox.
Okay. Okay. So now
So
your art is in galleries all over the country and all over the world and other places too. And how do you go from that to then packing up and deciding to drive a Sprinter van across all 48 states?
I know that was kind of a wild idea, but this was all part of the leaky roof conversation. And so when I sat down and thought, how do I heal? How do I fix my leaky roof? And I don't know. I got this wild, harebrained idea. And I was like, why don't I outfit a sprint? Because I was really forcing myself. When you think about Alice in Wonderland and that book begins and she says, I try to think about what is it, 2 impossible things before breakfast. And so I thought, what's impossible but doable? I could. And I just started listing what's impossible but doable. And so I wrote down outfit a Sprinter van and drive around to all 50 states and paint the horizon. And I went to my sister and said, what do you think about this harebrained idea? And I thought she was going to poo-poo it. I mean, she's my sister after all. I thought maybe she'd be like, well, maybe you need to get a little more practical. And she actually looked at me because she had been by my side through my whole journey, this whole hard experience. I like to call her Little Sissy Bossy Pants, which is a very loving, affectionate term for her because she really helped me get through that.
I'm sure she loves that title.
She does.
Like my sister would.
Little Sissy Bossy Pants. So she actually responded to that harebrained idea and said, if you don't do it, I will be disappointed. And so she was very encouraging about it. And I thought, and I responded to her and said, do you think I really can do that? I mean, it's pretty wild harebrained. And she said, I think you can.
Nice.
So
I'm noticing 2 things as you share your story. One is you are a list person. You are writing down pros and cons and what can I do? What do I want to do? There's your list. See, I'm a list person too. Do you think that's important when you're planning a reinvention?
Yes, it's absolutely important. And I think that's part of how I knew that, I needed to avoid this mental health disaster because I didn't want a health crisis and a mental health crisis at the same time and a career crisis at the same time. I was like, I've got to keep my head on straight. So I really did plan and make lists. But I think they were very helpful. But what you and I have probably found, Amy, the longer you live, the more you find, okay, there's best laid plans. And then there's reality. There's what really happens. And so I did have my Millicent list, and I'm a pretty flexible person. I've got my list, but I'm okay veering off the list too. But boy, I was not ready for all of the curveballs that came my way. And so my list, I actually kind of had to throw it out. And kind of go by the seat of my pants, which is hard.
Sure. But that's why I write mine in pencil.
Oh, I need to learn from you.
And you just erase, start again.
And I think that's the part of reinvention too. And what I have really learned is to be okay with those moments and writing in pencil, because it's written down, you've got your plan, but there is the curveball, and going, that's okay that there was a curveball. How can I keep going? What can I do? And then embracing that resilience of that moment that you go, that was the curveball. I'm going to learn those lessons from the curveball and be ready for the next one.
The lists jump out at me. The other thing that jumps out at me is your sister and your brother-in-law. and the support. I feel like having a community, that it takes a village, right? It's not just with parenting and raising kids. It's about family. It's about finding your tribe. It's about your group, your family, your friends, surrounding yourself with people who support you, tell you when you're crazy, but also encourage you, right? Like your sister did.
Amy, we're on the same page because I actually wrote that word right here, and it's community. I think that's one thing that I'm learning and still trying to do more of is engage with community. Because, we were raised as Gen Xers, and Gen Xers are kind of that independent group, and you need to keep pushing forward and I can do this. And that resilience is, picking yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, you know what? I really have come to just love the support system of people and community. And I think that's what I would have done a little bit differently in that reinvention period. And in my next reinvention period is engage more with a wider group of support systems. So I think that's really important.
I think so. Too often we surround ourselves with what's comfortable and familiar. And sometimes that's toxic, right? Sometimes that's the people who make you feel bad or who don't cheer for you or who are jealous of you or, want to see you fail. Maybe they don't say it out loud, but I think
you can feel it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think as we age.
Had someone who met me during this Millicent van trip that I was taking, and she hugged me and then she looked me in the eye and said, "I hate you." And then she laughed. She goes, "I'm joking." And then she was like, "Actually, I'm not really joking."
Because she wanted to do what you were doing, but she didn't have the courage or the whatever to do it. When you were out on the open road, for how long was the trip, by the way?
Well, it ended up taking nearly 3 years. And what's so funny is I think the first time you and I met, what did I say, Amy? Did I say I was going to do it in 6 months? Something
I
crazy.
think so. Yeah. You were just going to go and hit all the states and come home.
Plan A.
But you erased off your list, that pencil list.
What's really interesting is I had planned out my route on a old-fashioned paper Rand McNally atlas. And I used a Sharpie when I planned my route.
Wow, brave. Brave.
It was brave. Oh my word. I ended up having to
a few times.
It did change.
So why did it take so long? Right? I know you had some breaks in there, and there was. I know you can't describe 3 years in just a couple of sentences, but explain a little bit about how the trip was, what it was like with sketchy health first of all, and being out on the open road by yourself in a van for on and off for 3 years.
Right. So why it took 3 years is number one, of course, I set out to start my van renovation when we had the national supply chain issue, and prices were doubling every day, it seemed.
During the pandemic.
Was part of that. Exactly. We couldn't even get, right. So it was during the pandemic when I started all of this. So it was A, supply chain issues, B, weather. I just remember like my windshield wipers going back and forth and freezing and snow and all sorts of things. That weather played a part of it. Van issues played a part of it. I remember I was on Route 66 and heard this funny noise, and I thought, it's dusk. There are no buildings around me. There's nowhere to go, and I'm hearing a funny noise, and this is not good. So it ended up being a very, very expensive. It was the day before Christmas, too. Of course. Everything dramatic that happens is the day before a holiday or on a holiday. So there were all of those issues. Yep.
What would you say was one of the biggest surprises on the journey?
Well, I do think it was the timeline surprise. And that was a real surprise to me because I was intent on making it 6 months because I didn't want to be on the road for years and years and years by myself in a van. That sounded terrible. So the other biggest surprise is that I had a lot of people say to me, "Ooh, do you feel safe traveling?" as a
Yes.
woman across the nation by yourself. And I have to say, because I did travel a lot for my career, I was very sensitive about where I was going, and my street smarts were constantly on. But
Hmm.
the biggest surprise probably was the fact that I met the nicest people, the nicest strangers that were willing to lend a hand, willing to give me a meal, willing to get in their car and drive somewhere to show me where to go. It was over and above just the goodness of Americans from east to west to north to south. It was incredible. So a shout out to Americans that there was never even one moment that I was concerned for my safety.
Wow.
So,
That warms my heart, doesn't it?
mhm,
Because all I feel like all we hear is the negative. All we see on
that's
the
right.
news, all we see on our social feeds is how this group hates this group and this group hates this group and everybody's at war and we're about to go to civil war. And it's so refreshing to know that everyday people are trying to do good and are trying to be better people. And you got to
Yes.
witness it firsthand. Is there anything that you would change or do differently in hindsight, right? Of course, hindsight's 2020. Would you do anything differently if you could?
Amy, there's so much I would do
I bet.
different.
Another long list.
I would do the whole thing differently now.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot that I did right. And you asked me before if I ever like pat myself on my back or give myself accolades for doing this. And I'm
Yeah.
getting there. I didn't at first, but I'm getting there. I'm like, wow, like
You did this.
I should be proud of doing that. And who cares that I didn't do it right the first time? What is right after all for a harebrained
Exactly.
idea? But I think what I would do differently is I would have more of that community factor that we talked about. But I think I would have been maybe even more intentional about engaging a community from start to finish to help with maybe the telling of the story as it was happening.
I think a lot of people have this idea. Oh, I would love to do that. I would love to travel around the country and, just head out. But then when it gets hard, it's easy to
Mm,
give up. And you could have easily given up. You thought about it a few times and nobody would have blamed you either, right? Oh man, I did this for 6 months. I saw 14 states or half the states, and that would have been great. Why was it that you didn't give up? Why did you finish this journey?
I thought about giving up probably 100 times. I cannot tell you. I really did. And the one time that we met, I saw your eyes go, oh, I wonder if she's actually going to finish this.
It was a big
It was a
dream.
big nut to crack. Why I didn't give up is I knew I could picture myself in the retirement home in my 80s going, gosh, I really should have finished that. you know?
Right?
And
Regrets?
regret. When I wanted to quit, I wanted to say, do you want to be known as the person who almost achieved what she set out to do? I thought, no, I don't want to. I have got to finish this. So those are the kind of things that kept me going.
I know at one point, over the 3-year journey when you were traveling through all 50 states, you actually accepted a position at Georgia State University. And that was kind of a reinvention inside of a reinvention. Can you tell us a little bit about that pivot?
So the reinvention is almost like a blooming flower. You know how you see that bud on the end of a flower stem, and that bud opens and then it opens and then it opens some more, and it keeps it's layers and layers and layers of petals. And I think that's what this reinvention really is. And Amy, I have to say that professorship probably won't be my last reinvention. But I happen to be, I'd always wanted to teach. And I was at a networking event and I found out about this opportunity to become a professor at Georgia State University and take the key lessons that I learned working for a powerful Fortune 200 company and then aid in the growth and learning of the next generation. And I'm finding great passion around that. So in part, that's also what stalled that journey a little bit, is then once I started teaching, then during the breaks, I had to finish my 50 state journey. And it was interesting.
And I think you're like a lot of people where, you were in this career, this was your life, and you loved it. And then you were forced to reinvent yourself. And then all of a sudden now you're like reinventing yourself as an artist. And then you're a world traveler. And then you're a teacher. And so do you find that you've now reinvented yourself a couple of times, looking into the future, thinking of future reinventions? Does that seem overwhelming, or like, oh, here we go again? Or is it almost less scary because now you kind of have a plan, you kind of know what you're doing?
I love this question. Great question, because I am excited about the reinventions now. So I kind of feel like it's like going to the gym. When you first start working out, it hurts. It's not fun. You force yourself to do it. And then you get in a role. You develop a community at the gym. It becomes like you're passionate about it, and you're excited to go to the gym, right? Once it becomes part of your life. And I feel like that's how I feel about reinvention right now. Like I've kind of gotten over that sort of, I felt fixed in my corporate job. And now I'm like, there's a lot I'd like to add to that reinvention. So yeah, I look at it with really sort of a bright smile toward the future now.
Nice. It gives you more confidence, doesn't it?
Momentum begat momentum. Is that what they say? Yeah.
Yes. So what is your advice to others who maybe like you are forced to reinvent themselves? They weren't really planning on it. Maybe it's a health scare like yours or something else, maybe a job loss or divorce, death. There's a lot of people who need to reinvent themselves, whether they want to or not. So what would your advice be to them?
Yeah. I think the two main things that we've already talked about are the write it down, keep writing it down, keep getting creative, keep digging deep and write it down. Surrounding yourself with community. Those are the two things that we've really stressed during this conversation. But the third thing that I think that is really, really important is embrace the mistakes, embrace the messiness of it, embrace the fact that everything in this life is impermanent, and just embrace that. Yes, there's death. Yes, there's divorce. Yes, there's illness. And how can you use those really uncomfortable, messy, and sometimes mistakes to learn from it and become something that you would have never otherwise believed was possible?
All right. Christiane Palpant, thank you so much for being here, being a guest on my podcast. I know that your story is going to inspire so many people. Listen, if people want to know more about you, where can they find you or follow you, your accounts, your social media?
So it's a beautiful thing that there is no other person by my name in the world. So if you Google my name, it is really easy to find me. You can even find my website, which is Palpant Art. There's some future reinventions that I'm really excited about that are coming down the pike. So
well, I am excited, and I hope that you will perhaps join me again in the future on Reinvention at Any Age and talk about a future reinvention that you have.
I think so, Amy. I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about your reinvention too. So this is a beautiful, beautiful conversation to continue.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christiane. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So what about you? Were you inspired by Christiane's story? Do you ever wish that you could just pack up and hit the open road and travel to all 50 states? For some of us, that seems impossible. I mean, we have to work, we've got kids, a job, responsibilities. Maybe traveling in a Sprinter van isn't something that you can just do today. But what else could you do that's new? What's one thing that you could do that would push you toward becoming the new you? I mean, we're all really good at finding excuses, right? And even sometimes it's really easy to play victim. I mean, I did that when I was looking at leaving my full-time career and reinventing myself. I would always look at other people and make excuses. But they have more money, but they have more time. They don't have kids or a mortgage or anything else that I have to deal with. If you want to reinvent yourself, you are the only one that can make it happen. So whether you want to reinvent yourself or you have to reinvent yourself, remember, reinvention is possible. Go make it happen for you today.